Great. Hi, welcome to everyone. Roots to Harvest is, we are a settler run. I'm going to give a bit of an overview about Roots to Harvest and where we are so you can understand the context in which we work and then how the evaluation is built from there. So, Roots to Harvest is a settler run organization found within the Robinson Superior Treaty area. And so we work on land. And so it's super important to always recognize our land on the North Superior shore. And Fort William First Nation is the community that is right here, and they're the signatories of the 1850 Robinson Superior Treaty. And so whenever we do work on land related to food, we're always super cognizant about who we work with and how we present information and in what way. And we have lots to learn about that. So I'm going to present to you what we are doing. And if there's like feedback, all kinds, like critical feedback or things I'm not making sense about, please let me know, because I'd really love to tease those ideas out. I think working through evaluation and talking it through with other people has really helped us as an organization. So a bit about our organization. So we are 12 years as a registered not-for-profit. And in that time, we have gone, specifically in the last 5 years, from 3 full-time staff to 13 full-time staff. And we're now at an operating budget of about 1.6 million. So our, going from small little not-for-profit to quite big. And then we're also in the transition of becoming a community food center. And so our evaluation happens across all of our program areas, but specifically I'm going to talk about the ways in which we do it around education. And so we do similar evaluation in our employment programs and in like our community food markets. And we do it as a way for us to check in to see if we're actually meeting our goals and to answer the so what? We're doing a community food market, so what? Is it really benefiting people? How is it benefiting people? Are we actually meeting the needs of people? And then from our evaluation, we'll then tease out little parts if we need to use it for reporting within grants or something. But really our main goal is not for grants. We use components for our grants, but really it's for organizational development. And we're getting better at it, better at sharing it internally and externally. So I'll start. So why can't I, oh wait, okay. So we do a bunch of different programs. And so I'm going to focus a little bit about what we do within the schools. So our programming is really interesting in the schools in that we do a number of one-off programs, but mostly our programs we do with classrooms 3 or 4 times during a semester. Oh, I should also say we work with high school students. Those little elementary kids are like too unpredictable for us. We like the tough teenagers. So that's sort of where we live in that. And so we use a lot of different modes of evaluation. So, we use the head, heart, and hands or feet, however you want to see it. You've probably seen versions of this in many different ways. And so one of the ways that we do it is we often incorporate it with like a photo, like a photo documentary. So, we'll get youth together. Maybe they've been with us for 5 sessions over a semester. We've taken lots of pictures indoors, outdoors. We then have a photo deck and then a way for them to print them immediately. And we sometimes, if we're with them a lot and have part of our Forest Meets Farm curriculum, which is 12 times in a class, then we'll actually spend like half of the class getting them to write down what is it that they have, what is it is in their head and what is in their heart and what is in their feet. And then they find an image to go with it. Because sometimes working with teenagers, it's really hard to get words out. It's really hard. And it's easier in a picture. So sometimes pictures help to illustrate it, which then helps to bring the words out. And so we find we use this head, heart, and hands as a midway check-in. So if we're doing something that's 6 different sessions, so maybe at session 3, we'll check in, and it could give us a bit of a conversation starter about things that we need to include more of, or what they're really, what's really resonating with them. And so that's one example of head, heart, and hands or feet. And then they often will then write in different ways, or often we'll have to scribe for them. What did they learn? Teamwork, saving seeds, transplanting, the power of vegetables, what they felt, sense of belonging, trust. And again, this is their words. We try not to edit it out in terms of it's the way that they're expressing themselves. And I think it's important to keep with that. And then sort of the impact or the feat, you know, the confidence for the future, the connection to people, the dedication. And so we try to do this in different ways so that people can access it and access their memories. So sometimes pictures will jog memories of things that they've done, because sometimes it's really hard to do evaluation if they can't remember what they just did. You know, the teenage brain is ever developing, and sometimes it's really hard for them to remember what they did yesterday or in the hour that you were with them. So that's one piece of evaluation. And then I'm going to talk later about how we pull out all these pieces. Another example is this really simple. I went into a class on Thursday. We did a simple local food miles activity, and then we made a breakfast together of all these local foods. We did that in 76 minutes, so it was like super jam-packed. And then this was sort of their exit card. And again, it's another version of this head, heart, and hands, feet, however you want to do it, but it's sort of like what's something they learned and they have to write it in the head, what's a new skill in their hand, and what's a heart. And that is, you know, kids are really used to exit cards. And so this is a way, you know, for us to gauge what is actually sticking with them, what we need to fill out on, or what we should keep continuing to do. And the teachers also appreciate this. I would say that none of what we do in the schools is connected to curriculum. We know that teachers can make the curriculum connections, so we usually meet ahead and ask teachers like what they're focusing on and how we can support them. And so we don't actually have like canned packages of programs. We don't go in and say, oh, we have these 6 programs, choose 1, 3, 5. We work with individual teachers to make it relevant. And I think by doing that, it's allowed us to have a bit more success. Another thing that we are doing, and so this is just an example, you know, what did I learn? Every vegetable can be roasted and meat doesn't have to be intimidating. The skills I gained, bread making is important. And then what cues to watch for, improve knife skills, basics on what to do. And then the other one that's really quantifiable is that I've gained confidence, acceptance, and welcome. And I have to say that like our programs are about, it's not about curriculum delivery, it is about making connections and building relationships through food. And so that becomes the focus. So the heart piece becomes really important to us because we want to know how is this felt within them, and what is the emotional piece, and are we actually getting it, or are we not getting it? So then we'll often take this information and then we'll, you know, put it in different codes, and we'll try to, you know, put together similar themes. This also gives us great information about for our annual reports, for our funding campaigns. You know, we can use these as direct quotes from things. So often that's a really great thing that we use from it. Sometimes if we've gone into a class maybe 3 times, we're going to ask them to evaluate it on a simple sheet. They forget what they've done. Like, I have a hard time remembering what I did the day before. So to lead up to evaluation, and again, this works like not as a one-off, but maybe you've been there a couple of times, is something like a summary wall. So this is an example of our forest meets farm. And in this program, you know, we did stuff around forest, around farming, hunting, gathering, fishing, preserving. And so we drew up, you know, if you can see, there's a jar for preserving and a carrot for farming. And then we get them to write down on sticky notes, what were some of the things that they learned, or they did anything randomly, anything that when they think of farming, what did they learn about it? And so we're not actually looking at the content of what that's on there, but sort of like what are they actually remembering? And then from there, we would then go into any kind of evaluation. We could do a head, heart, and hands, or we could do a survey page, like get them to answer questions. But what we also find is that like it's really hard to give kids a piece of paper to sit and write, that they kind of need something else to do. So sometimes we bring activities to do while they're doing the evaluation. So these kids are making butter. I just put a whole bunch of cream in a jar and I was like, let's do the evaluation. And while you're doing it, all those kids who like to jiggle and move around, let's just do this at the same time. And I find that if they're doing something at the same time, they kind of like feel it's like part of their learning, and they don't feel like, oh, I have to do this evaluation. Oh, I'm just going to get this over as quick as possible. That the answers become a bit more thoughtful and insightful. And so when we're doing like a final reflection evaluation, we often will do that in different ways. And so that's, and then this is be an example of the paper that they're answering. And so we would do this like, this is the pre-survey around their food connections. And again, we're always changing this. So since I've put this together last week, we decided to change a few questions, and it's built on the kids that we know in the class. So we're always changing. So the hard piece with evaluation for us is that sometimes you want to have the same questions so that you can compare it over the years, but kids change and the interests change and the programs change. So we don't have a standard one that we use every single year for every single program, but we might have 3 or 4 components that are always the same in it so that those can be comparable. And so like this is a pre-survey, so it's getting them to see, like we often do pre and post because we want to see like, did their knowledge change? Did their engagement change? And so that helps us to know, again, are we doing something that is hitting the mark or not? And so those are for school programs when we go in and they're a bit longer, but then we do other kinds of, so when we do say one-off programs, we will also use Google Forms. And I'm sure you've used Google Forms in different ways, but we find Google Forms super easy, not only to collect the data, but also to like code it and have it typed into a computer where we're not trying to understand the kids' language. And so I'm just gonna stop sharing this and just show you, and you all probably have, if I need to change my screen, do I need to, Carolyn?
Yeah.
I want to do a new share.
You just do what you need to do and I'll let you know what I see.
Okay.
So I can see your email now.
Yes. I'm trying to, I can't stop something from the top.
Yeah, I see the flowers and there's, it says recently. Oh.
I can't move the thing to change my tabs. So I'm trying to just move that. I'm sorry, guys.
No problem.
There. Okay, so this is like our school program evaluation. So we've gone into semester 1. We do it at the end of the semester. Even if we've only gone in once, we don't actually, well, we don't really go into programs once, but you could do it at once. And again, these questions have changed a whole lot. We have a teacher evaluation and a student evaluation. They answer their information in here. We have scaled questions. How do you feel, you know, when Roots to Harvest is in your program, your favorite program, what did you learn about it? And the best thing about this is that the responses then get coded, right? So that you can actually see individual questions and the answers to it and how many people responded. You can see that the individual, or you can see the summary, which allows you to see it in, some of the stuff is in chart form and percentage. And so that really helps us like kind of think about, oh my gosh, we did so, like, what does this other actually mean? And we did, you know, a quarter of our time is doing outdoor pizza. And just, is that really the time that we want to spend, and how do we want to spend it? And so that's been super beneficial for us so that we can see how are we spending the time. And I can, from a staffing perspective, I can figure out, okay, do we have enough staff? But then I can also pull out these questions. And the other thing that we do with this, which I really, I'm going to share another, I'm going to change my screen to show you the other, oh, I think it's on this one too. I'm going to share this, is can you see that, Carolyn? Oh no, not
it says KZA Community Food Market.
No, it's the next one I want to share. I think it's this one.
It says the impact of Roots to Harvest. Okay.
Yeah, is that we then take that information, and at the end of the semester, with whatever we're doing, we put together using Canva. And Canva has been like a game changer for us because it's beautifully laid out ways to put your information in. So this is an example. So semester 1, we did surveys. Again, we're still in COVID, so we're let into some schools, not into other schools, but we wanted to send something to the school board so that they can see, like the school board, like the actual board, the director, you know, the high school liaisons, as well as to each individual principal, so they can see what we are actually doing. So we were able to reach 554 students, 32 classrooms, how many hours, what are the different schools that we went in. And so we up here work in the public school, but we also work in our local federally funded First Nations schools, as well as our local community, like in the local First Nations communities. So what do we do? How do we categorize them? But then the best part is including pictures and then quotes from teachers. What did the teachers have to say? 100% said that their attendance went up when Roots to Harvest was present in their classroom. So we have real tangible stuff that makes sure the school board sees that we're still on their radar, we're still doing relevant things. You know, obviously this is a highlight. This is showing the school all of the great things that we've done. We wouldn't necessarily include on here like the ways in which we would change internally, which we already have got that information from our surveys, but we put quotes in it, how teachers are incorporating, you know, the material into their curriculum. And then we have what students have to say, how much they like Roots to Harvest. And then the question that we ask a lot is describe Roots to Harvest in 3 words. And we do that for teachers and for students. And it really helps us like have those little short sound bites if we need to use in other material. So we're trying to think of evaluation, not just like, what is it about this individual program, but how can we then use it in our organization, in our funding campaigns, in making us relevant for schools? What are the things that we do? And then we also, you know, this, you know, we've been including stuff around the pandemic and how we've shifted our learning. And so how many staff are involved? So really like, it's like a summary for the schools that we're in and the school board. That's what we present to them, but what we also get is like, what do we need to change and shift, and what programs are like kind of duds, or maybe we need to do retraining on it or come up with new information. And so I'm going to just show another this one is, it's just another example. So we had another person do it. But again, it's like all of the, like during COVID, it was super important for us to tell the schools that we're still in the schools, we want to be in the schools, and how are we going to do it during COVID, and sort of what do we anticipate coming up. So we're able to move all of our stuff outdoors, even indoors. And so presenting it in this way was really great. It's beautifully laid out. We can share it with everyone. And so that also is been good. I want to share one other Canva just so you can see, like, you know, I know everyone does different. This is just like real school-based programs. But, and this I will, I love that I get to admit this one, because so during COVID, we ended up with the school nutrition program, received a whole bunch of funding. And this was for the first round in 2020. We did a summary so that we could share with our funders, with the school board, what we actually did around the school nutrition program. So this is a combination that we, you know, it's the COVID emergency kit and breakfast and snack foods, sort of like what happened in the pandemic, what did we do? You know, we did 7,800 bags over 19 weeks. Like, it was a totally ridiculous thing that we did. What are our sites? So we sent this report to all of our community partners, every single one, the public schools, the not-for-profits that we shared with. And then we actually did a survey of our food bags, because we did it twice, because we're like, are we actually putting stuff in there that we should be putting? And what do you think about it? It was super hard to do it because already people were feeling like it's COVID and they were wearing masks, and should they be talking to someone else in a mask? Like, this was the early time around. But also we asked a lot of personal information in line with what are some of like the StatsCan questions, so that we can compare it to that. So how did people hear about the food bags? What our PSA looked like? How do people identify of the food bags? Like, what was their, how did they identify? Some of these, you know, were ones that they self-identified, you know. But it was important for us to look at that, it was also important for us to see like how many people were in the households and was this food enough for a lot of them? What was their age distribution? And then how did they like things, you know? And I think I will highlight, I think there was one about 83.5 said the quality of food that they received like was high quality, 77 that all the food that got eaten before it went bad. And then, you know, number of times people got it, what was sort of included in it. And then we sent this to our community partners. But as I'm saying that, maybe I know Dan is on this phone from the Fruit and Veggies in the Northern Food Program. Our intent was to send it to our community partners, but now that I'm saying this, I don't actually know if it went to everyone. And I guess that's a key thing to remember is making sure these reports get to the people that need to see them. I think see them as a way of like, yes, work was done, but also in a way to sort of like understand what's happening in different places so that that conversation can happen at a higher level. And so, oh yeah, we also included education pieces and asked questions about the educational materials that are in that. And so between all of those methods, you know, like Google Forms, Head, Heart, and Hands, kind of more arts-based stuff by sticking sticky notes as a way to remember, we find it's important to ask the questions across like different programs, but also to be able to present this information. Because if you don't present it, then there is very little institutional memory or the conversation can't go a bit further. And so I guess I just want to maybe end this bit by saying, can you see that, Carolyn?
Limitations and considerations?
Yeah.
Yep.
Is that, so in some settings, we know that it is very challenging to get evaluations of programs done. Sometimes teachers are like, oh, we have to do this again, but we just push through that. And we're just like, yep, we want to get better every single time. And it's really important for us to hear your feedback. But we know that in some settings, it's really challenging, especially with kind of what I would say one-off programs, because it's often the surface questions and they don't necessarily always give you the answers that you're looking for. We want to, one other consideration that we always do is that we want to ensure that questions overlap, you know, with our bigger programs as well as with our other programs. We want to have some overlap so that if we need to make some comparisons or find some things that are similar or different, that's there. We also know that it is so hard to design an evaluation that can elicit real information. Often we get surface answers. And so that's really hard to get the stuff that you really want, the real pithy stuff that you want. And I will say organizationally, as we're getting bigger and multiple people in different programs, we're trying to create more institutional memory so that if new staff come on or we have to remember what we did in 2020 for the pandemic and food and how many bags we actually reached, we don't have to go into 16 different files or ordering forms, that it's all right there. So we use evaluation as a combination of that. Like, are we on mark? A way to remember. And then we tease out the stuff for, like, you know, I just did an OTF Resilient Communities report and I pulled out information from those other pieces that could go into it. And yeah, I think that's, Carolyn, I think that's like it for what I want to share. And I will stop sharing.
Thanks, Airin.
You have questions or things that I missed?
Yeah, that's really great. Does anybody have any questions for Airin? You can either just ask. I see Anita. Anita, do you want to ask your question?
I do. I have a couple comments and a couple questions, if you don't mind. The first comment that I have is I absolutely love the term institutional. I think institutional memory. Airin, I love that term. That's so fantastic. And I think that we all could probably use a little bit of that. I know that about 10 years ago, when somebody told me that I should get everything out of my head and onto paper or somewhere into a shared database or something, that I should do that. And I love that term. Thank you for sharing that. A couple other, well, my two questions would be, first of all, you've done a lot of surveys, which I think that is, I mean, one of definitely a great way to make sure that we're getting the information for evaluations. What is your return rate on, or your return of your response rate on that, on those surveys usually?
Yeah, so I would say, you know, we reached 550 students in, like, that's how many students we reach, and we got 125 surveys back. But we almost always get 100% from the teachers.
Perfect, nice.
So teachers give us a lot, students not so much. Yeah, and I don't know, it's a product of, like, some of them get paper and some of them get digital right now, and sometimes we forget. And sometimes it can't fit into their programming. It's not super high. I would say like probably 25%.
Okay. And that obviously gives you enough information. It looks like the stuff that you've captured on your Canva presentations were really beautiful. So
Yeah.
The second question I have for you is, do you actually have, or can you share an evaluation planning template? I know that a few years ago I had done a grant application to the city of Guelph for a couple of our programs, and they provided us with a really wonderful template, evaluation template that included goals, included data management, included the tools that we should be using. I'm just wondering if you have perhaps a little bit more simple one that we could use.
No, but I would love if there's one out there. Like, I feel like every time we do a program, it's like, oh my gosh, we need to remember to evaluate this. Oh my gosh, we have to, like, I feel like we're just scrambling all the time. I think we're getting a bit better at the timing of things and not forgetting about things. My sense, and Carolyn, maybe you can comment on this, I think you are hoping that you're going to create some sort of templates that people can use, but I don't have one of those. Maybe someone else here does.
No, and it sounds like, Anita, you're talking about an evaluation planning template, in terms of just the different checkboxes to tick. Well, the funny bit is that the post-event survey that I want to send all of you, I haven't done yet, and I need to run it by Airin still. It was one of those like, oh, right, we know how to evaluate this webinar even. So I think everybody probably agrees that it's one of those, tricky things, but so essential. What we will be doing, is these 3 events, having speakers share their tools and then creating some post-event toolkits, but don't have any, I haven't seen any evaluation like program templates and how you plan it. Or planning ones. It would be great, as you said, if anybody else on the call might have some suggestions, that could be excellent.
You know, I also think, Anita, like some of our programs, we have pre-surveys, questions, drawing pictures. Like sometimes we'll even just get them to draw pictures, and then we have a post drawing picture, and then we compare the two. I don't think we're consistent. And I think we could really use one because, like, we just finished a big program and we totally forgot to do the post evaluation. And I was like, how did that happen? And it just...
As you said, maybe something to develop.
How happy I am to hear you say that, because probably a lot of us on this call are in the same situation. So thank you for your honesty on that, Airin.
Airin, I see another question in the chat box from Marie. It's, does your evaluation only focus on food literacy? I'm interested in knowing if you also do evaluation for the consumption of healthy food in a school setting, and if so, how do you measure the consumption of healthy food?
No. We don't do that. So we're not as interested about healthy food consumption as we are about kids having a relationship with food, having food stories, and also building connections. And so I think that's what that's what our organizations focus on. I will say, like, outside of the school setting, we run a number of programs that we have a dietitian who heads up a few programs, our Cooking for Credit program. And in that, we do, oh no, I just said we do that. And I think it's done in like a questionnaire form, like what is the number and how do you eat this and what does it look like? And so we do that, but not in a school setting, because that's never been our focus in the school setting.
Yeah, I can just jump in on that. We having developed the framework, the evaluation framework, we looked at all the indicators that were named as priorities and thought, well, how could these be measured? And some, it's a simple survey. And the food consumption one, we had an intern look into a whole bunch of different studies and best practices around that. And it's complex. It sounds as though there are food diary exercises, and we'll be sharing some of those as we develop different materials. Farm to Cafeteria Canada did a review of some of the grantees and did a pretty extensive 24-hour recall thing, but that was a lot of work and money to make that work. And we have some really interesting findings, but that was the food consumption is one thing that from our look at all the different tools and indicators to measure is a challenging one. And so, yeah, we'll keep working to try to find usable tools in that, but just wanted to acknowledge that piece.
Mm-hmm. Well, and as you say that, Carolyn, so we don't do that as Roots to Harvest going into schools, but our local Thunder Bay District Health Unit, they have a school health promoter that sometimes is a dietitian in all of the schools. Maybe this is common across. I'm not a dietitian, so I don't know. But up here, and they do that. I know that they survey and ask those questions. If it's in the elementary, they go to the classes. If it's in the high schools, they do it in the foods classes. So I know that in our area that we have that information, but it's not through us.
Thanks, Erin. I see Clara has asked a question. What would be your advice for an elementary school that would like to try to evaluate?
So I would ask the question of, is it the whole school? Is it the teachers of the school? Or is it just the classrooms that you have programs in? Because I think like what I have realized in evaluation is you really have to tailor it to the group that you're in. And if it's the whole school, you're going to tailor something differently to the K through probably grade 2 classes, than the 3, 4, 5, then the 6, 7, 8s. I think you would do different kinds of evaluation. So, the question we always start with first is like, what is the so what? Like, what do we actually want to find out? We don't just want a victory narrative every time. We want to be able to find out things that worked well, but also things that were missing, things we might not have noticed. And so I guess I would, those questions about like how, I don't think there's a one size fits all. I think you have to like work with the individual schools and know who's at each of the individual schools to be able to figure out what questions to ask and how to do it. And I think that's why, I think we're still struggling with evaluation because we're not always sure if this is the right question to ask or the best question to ask at the time, or something that works in one school doesn't work in another school, but we don't have the time to like come up with all of these different evaluations. And then, I have 6 people on my team that I work with, and we all have varying understanding of evaluation. And so I want other people to be able to do evaluation, but I also want it, and I'll be honest, our last semester 1 schools report was done by someone who's never done evaluation before. So 50% of the questions they collected, in my mind, aren't useful to us. Collecting a kid's name, we don't need kids' names. Maybe school, so we can, evaluate it by school, but we don't actually need kids' names, or, there was a number of questions. And so we also have a hard time with like who can take it on to create the evaluation. That's hard.
Thanks, Erin. Any other questions? I think I'll ask one. How do you implement the surveys? I mean, you said you're sometimes in the class and, get them to make butter and whatnot. And it sounds as though sometimes you've done it through the staff. I know people talk about just even having access to be able to do the evaluations can be tricky. Friend's trying to reach me, but can you name if there have been any barriers to even accessing the kids to do that evaluation, or how you get teacher buy-in for that piece?
Yeah, so the thing that we have that's unique that might not be in other places is that, we're in a smaller town of 120,000 people. And so we're in the public schools. We're not in any Catholic schools. We are in some like elementaries for the 7-8 classes and the high schools. But because so much of our focus is building relationships, we really have gotten to know the teachers. So even if I have a brand new staff that's going into schools, it's an existing relationship with a teacher that we have had for a number of years. And so that teacher they don't see us as a one-off. They don't see us as a way to babysit their kids for one class. They have bought into the relationship. And I think when that happens, there's pressure for them to perform. I think they don't want to like not do it because like we're in this like relationship together, right? So, and then there's always the teachers that don't return your emails and don't return your phone calls. And so we just show up and we just say, hey class, like, remember us? We were here with you. How about this? And no, that works. So, but I don't think everyone has the ability to do that in like larger settings. But again, then maybe that's a question of like, is that the work that people want to do? Like spread themselves so thin to, 75 different schools? Because really, I think, for community gardens, for developing salad bar programs, all of that stuff, we know that in the schools, you need to have a teacher champion. And if you don't have a teacher champion, nothing happens. And so for us, the teacher champion would allow with someone who's bought in, and so they'll do it.
Yeah, thanks. So much is about relationships and the trust and also accountability to each other and just, wanting to, support that relationship. So super valuable. Thank you. I don't see any other questions. Does anyone have any more? If not, I'll ask another one. All right, I'm curious about, you showed an evaluation survey before and some of the questions, about skills that kids have learned. Is there a general theme that you have in terms of what you're really looking for in the questions? I mean, it sounds like you use the Canva things across the board, but I'm just curious if you could share some of the questions that you're like behind the scenes thinking of that you want to capture. Because whenever people ask me, what should I be asking in my evaluation, I often say, well, what are your goals in the first place? Are you trying to communicate to funders, or is it more of a figuring out, the success in certain key areas, or what? Can you just share some of that thinking that goes into developing the questions?
I don't know if we ever go into evaluation as a way to like, we need to do this so we can evaluate, like, so we can give it to our funders. Like our evaluation, our first look at it is like, are we actually doing what we set out that we want to be doing? And is this what we should be doing? And so our questions are often focused around that, of like, what was the experience? What were the relationships? Maybe, content questions about content, but we do also want some of those more quantitative pieces for our funders. And so we ask those questions. So we will never do an evaluation for a funder, but we will do an evaluation that has pieces that can be pulled from it. And again, it's like, it's always a mixture of qualitative and quantitative. We like doing pre and post, see change over time. And we always ask goals, like when we sit down, we're like, what are the goals? Like when we come into a kid's class, what do we want them? We want them to be curious about food. So how do we ask a question about curiosity? We want to ask, what is their feel? And then that can be summed up if you had 3 words to describe Roots to Harvest, so we like to have those sort of questions. The ones that become a bit more, which I feel are a bit more invasive, like what is your cultural background? How many people are in your home? I think those are a bit more invasive questions. I feel like those happen when we have something that it's within the context, and it's always couched with, these questions help to make us, do better and serve you better. There's always those qualifying statements that are in it, so people know how the information is going to be used, and we always give people an option to opt out if they don't want to do it. But also that information is super important. Like when we were doing those food bags and we found out that, most families were 4 people or higher, then that changed what we were putting in them. So, and we like to ask, there's an organization here in town, and they do one of those weekend like food bags that kids take home. And I think it's really good for those kids. Like they have, the idea that kids might not have access to foods at home, so it's easy to access open foods that they can make. They've been up here for 10 years and they have not, when we were starting on the pathway of learning how to do food bags, which we've never done, I approached them and I said, what do kids like in bags? I can tell you what I would like, but what do kids actually like? They said to me, well, we've never, they just take the bags. And I said, well, what has your evaluation said over the last 10 years that you've been doing it? And they haven't ever asked the kids. And in my mind, that's like a glaring omission. Like we need to be asking the people who we're working with. And then usually we always end our end our surveys with, like, what's the question that we didn't ask that you wish we did? And often it's left blank. But the times in which people write something in is always a good moment for us about what are we missing?
Thanks, Airin. I don't see any other questions, so I'll ask one more quick one. I'm just curious if you could share just a little story of how you've communicated your evaluation or something that's just been a big success. I don't know, that you might not have something offhand, but if you do, great to share.
Yeah, so we've been doing affordable food markets, going into communities and doing some of these affordable food markets. And so at the end of our first year of doing an affordable food market and doing an evaluation and putting it all together, we then were able to take the results from that and sort of like, you know, have people increase the amount of fruits and vegetables. So there was some like nutrition aspects to it. There's some like, you know, a lot of stuff is focusing right now on social isolation. So there were some of those aspects so we did this, you know, survey, we then put it into Canva, we then made a report. And then when two of our local drive-in First Nations communities so it's like 3 or 4 hours for either of them to get into Thunder Bay, and that's where they do their grocery shopping. They approached us and they're like, we are looking for ways in which people can buy fruits and vegetables at an affordable cost, but they don't have a vehicle and they can't drive to Thunder Bay. What do you propose? And so we were able to take this report and just say, this is what we've experienced with another one. These are some of the things that have worked well. And would this be something that, you know, you would want to do in collaboration with? And so it wasn't like a project proposal, but we showed the impact that it was having. And so we find that, like, we are very, like, we share, like, if someone calls me up and they're like, I need to see what your evaluation report looks like, we just send them off to everyone. Like, we don't have this, did we do a bad job? And do we have a spelling mistake? Like, those things we're not really ashamed of, because there's probably mistakes in all of them. But we want to share because we feel that by hearing other people's stories and by trying things out, it just makes everything feel a bit easier to do. And so that's an example of one where we did not expect to be working in partnership with these communities, and now we are. And they were like, oh my gosh, that's the most beautiful report. Who is your designer? And like, Canva makes everything easy. Posters. If you buy the pro account, because then you have access to more stuff. I think it's like $100 a year or something.
That's awesome, Airin. I don't see any more questions, so I'll just give a big thank you. You've shared so much, like the Google Forms, the templates you use, the tools, and the Canva. I can see, I bet a lot of people's thoughts are going right now. And yeah, just a big thanks for sharing all that, Airin. It'll be fun to pull together a bit of a toolkit with some of those pieces and share it widely. So thanks to everybody who joined. We have our next events on March 24th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time with Andrew Fleet from Growing Chefs Ontario, and also March 29th at 1 o'clock Eastern Time with Rebecca Tran from the Station Food Company in Nova Scotia. And yeah, we'll be sending out, once we finalize it, a short evaluation form to hear what you thought of this and how we could either improve it for next time for the future ones, or just to hear what other useful tools or events might be that folks would like to see on the call. And so yeah, we'll share the recording and a toolkit in the future. And with that, just a big thanks to Airin, and have a great day, everyone. Sure, we'll talk later.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And if folks want like specific examples of things, my email is just Airin@rootstoharvest.org. I think Carolyn will be able to share it. Yeah. But like, email me and I can share things with you if that's helpful. I don't want to overwhelm people, but if things are helpful, then yeah. I would just say that one other thing, we take lots of pictures. We always include pictures in everything that we do, because it's just an easier way sometimes to communicate. Yeah, my recent OTF grant, I just like had so many pictures I could now include.
Yeah.
Let me put it in.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone. Have an awesome day.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks, guys.